Alright, story about a fisherman, old guy, gets in a boat, fishes in this one spot every morning. He rows out to it, it's a nice, calm, quiet place, he's out there, he's got his line in the water, and all of a sudden, this frog jumps into his boat. Doesn't think anything of it, but the frog starts to talk and says, listen, I used to be a beautiful princess. All you have to do is kiss me, and I will turn back into the princess, and I will be your wife. I will cook for you. I will clean for you. I will do everything you need for me to do. All you got to do is give me a kiss. The guy sits there and he thinks, reels in his line, puts his rod in the boat, and starts paddling back to shore. And the frog says, well, what do you think? He goes, nah, I'm too old. I'd rather have a talking frog. Can't tell that joke in mixed company. Mark, we I think it's funny. We're in Mark chapter 5, verse 21. Mark chapter 5, verse 21. If you remember, Jesus went over to the Decapolis, the 10 cities, and was met by a legion of demons, a man possessed by a legion of demons. So God is using Jesus and the apostles to bring the gospel of the good news, that seed that's going to bring life to a dark city. And so we saw this man had the demons cast out of him. Jesus shows his authority over demons, over disaster, over disease. And this guy is seated in his right hand at the feet of Jesus. But we saw that the people didn't want him there. Bad for business, so they sent him away. So Jesus now goes from the southeastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, goes back up to Capernaum, which is in the northern shore. And you're going to see a miracle within a miracle here. Now, the Bible records 37 miracles that Jesus did. John says that there's so many that he did, even all the books and all the libraries couldn't contain the information of what he did in his 3-year ministry. But I love this message here. This is Jesus Christ. It's a picture of Christ going to heal Israel, but gets interrupted on his way and heals a Gentile and goes back and heals the Jews. So it's a great picture of Christ's life. He came to that which was his own, but his own rejected him and did not accept it. But to those who receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to be called children of God, and that's what we are. But I think the central point of the whole message is you're never lost in a crowd. You're never lost in a crowd. I'm going to give you 3 great points to the text. You're going to see Jesus Christ is accessible, he is approachable, and he is available. Those are going to be the 3 main points. And I'm just going to pound, I'm going to start that nail, and we're going to see Mark just pound that Jesus is accessible, he is approachable, and he is available. Now take a look. Verse 21, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Now there are 3 types of people in this crowd. 3 types of people in this crowd. You're going to see the critical, you are going to see the curious, and you are going to see the contrite. So you have the critical, you have the curious, and you have the contrite. Do we not have the same thing? You've got these 3 types of people probably sitting in your church. You have the critical, those who want to sit there and critique everything that's going on. I told you one of the greatest weapons that Satan ever launched into the world is man's belief that he can sit in judgment of God's word and assess it. So you have the critical, the self-righteous, the elitists of the day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, and the teachers of the law. Then you're going to have the curious. These are the thrill seekers, right? These are the self-seeking hobnobbers. How's that for a word? When's the last time you heard that word? Hobnobbers.
You're from the Ozarks, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Bald
No, bald knobbers. Yeah. What's a hobnobber?
Rubbing elbows.
Rubbing elbows. Somebody just likes to hobnob with the big guys. These curious are the prosperity, health, wealth, prosperity seekers. They're the success seekers. They're the ones who move from the latest to the greatest. A lot of Christians are sensationalists. They like the sensationalism. I remember going to a conference Rick Warren put on out in California. And I'll never forget this conference. We were sitting there for 2 or 3 days. The whole conference was about how to tweak the methods of your church to bring people in. And I kid you not, we went into this one session. They had this massive dirt jump up on stage to where he had a motorcycle do this jump across these 2 dirt piles. And then he was saying, man, you need to do this at your church to bring people in. Seriously.
They're still doing it.
Still doing it, yeah. The latest and the greatest. I mean, there's one guy in town here that had a tank up on his stage, a couple of Ferraris, did a whole series from a bed up on the stage.
I won't mention his
Who
name.
could that have been? Who could that have been?
That's right.
So you got those people in your church. They want the sensationalism. The problem is, if that's what it takes to get them in, guess what you're going to have to do to keep them? You're going to have to keep up in your game. Right? You just give them the truth. So you got the curious, you've got the critical, and then you've got the contrite. These are the ones that are broken. These are those who are meek, who will inherit the earth. These are those who mourn. Like Jesus said, those who mourn will be comforted. Those who are poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled. That's the contrite. Now you're going to have 2 main people in the story, but Jesus is the hero. And again, this is, I love it. I love the way Mark lays it out. It's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's in all 3 of the synoptic gospels. But Mark, boy, he really brings in the action aspect. You see two people in the story stand out. You see a man and a woman. The man is rich. He's affluent. He is accepted by his culture. He is honored. He is a leader. He is a synagogue leader. And he has a 12-year-old child. The woman is poor. She's lowly. She's an outcast. She's ashamed. She's looked down upon. She is seemingly insignificant in her culture. She is excommunicated because she has a terminal disease. And she has been suffering for 12 years. So you got a man with a 12-year-old daughter. You have a woman that's been suffering for 12. The number 12 in the Bible is the number of perfect delegation. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, 12 foundational stones of the New Jerusalem, 12 gates, so on and so forth. Both of these people, the commoner and the elite, they have a need. They both have a need. And both these people will be driven to Jesus by their great need and their great faith. Boy, and I love it. Listen, the ground is level at the cross. And it don't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what kind of titles you have behind your name. It doesn't matter how many PhDs and master's degrees or anything else. You come to Jesus. Most people come to Jesus for 2 reasons. They have a great need and they have a great faith. And you're going to see that with both of these people. And again, Jesus is the hero. And both these people don't care what it takes to get to Jesus. They don't care how embarrassing it is. They don't care what they have to do. There's a great need, and they need a great Savior. So write down number 1, Jesus Christ is accessible. He is accessible. He was always out in the public. Boy, do we not see the contrast of the 2 presidents that we have? This new one and the old one? This one's accessible. He's always out there. What was his nickname?
Sleepy.
Brandon.
Basement Bible. I set myself.
Let's go.
I tell myself every day when I get up to do this, I'll say, don't get political, Bernard. Don't get political.
Let's go.
Do a good impression of him.
Why?
He's successful. Look at this. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. So he is accessible. You can get to him. Never forget the story. J. Vernon McGee says, can I say to you? Can I say to you? J. Vernon McGee, man. If you haven't heard him, listen to him. He's so good. And he's still doing his Bible bus,
He's been
right?
dead for like 20 years. He's still on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still preaching from the grave. That's awesome. He says one time he was out playing golf and he saw his president.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah.
You gotta talk like you're gonna quote it.
I've tried. Can I say to you? I can't talk like him. And he's just so distinct. But he said he was out golfing and he saw his president. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the president at the time. And he says, man, I just wanted to go up and give my president a big old hug around his neck. He said, but I knew if I got within 20 feet of that guy, I was going to get tackled on the green and cuffed and taken away. I just couldn't. There's no accessibility to the president. But here's Jesus, a massive crowd of curious, critical, and contrite people. And they can get to him. Listen, Jesus was a celebrity. If you think about it, in that area, Jesus Christ, when you said the name Jesus, even Josephus records that he was a great magician who did great miraculous things. He was a celebrity. When I was out at that conference with Rick Warren, I remember during the lunch break, we were out in the cafeteria area, and all of a sudden you see this hustle, something's coming through the crowd, and it's Rick Warren. And he's got 6 security guys around him. You couldn't get to him. But he's moving through the crowd and everybody, same thing with like Olstein and some of these other big guys in the prosperity gospel. Yes, with the prosperity gospel. They hailed him as heroes. But Jesus was a legitimate celebrity. He didn't want to be a celebrity. He came to spread the truth. Matter of fact, how many times after he healed somebody, performed a miracle, he told them, don't tell anybody. The reason being is he didn't want people coming to him and being attracted to him for the wrong reasons. Why did Jesus want people to be attracted to him? For what reason? And one reason only. For truth. To give God the glory. For truth. Isn't that what his priestly prayer was? Lord, sanctify them in thy truth. Thy word is truth. He wanted them to be attracted to him for his truth, for his message. Remember, even the Old Testament said there was nothing in his physical appearance that would attract us to him. He was not a least, he was a lowly carpenter. He was a blue-collar worker. He didn't come to the elite. So he is very accessible. He's always out in the public. Anybody could get to him. Rich, poor, a woman, a man, the high, the low, and the caste system. Didn't matter. If you were a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, he'd stop. If you were a little short dude that climbed a tree, he'd stop. Didn't matter. You got to love that about Christ. Did he turn anyone away that came to him? No. Matter of fact, he said, you come, all of you. Could the children get to him? Yeah, they climb him like a tree. I mean, you got to love that about Christ. Well, you don't see that today, do you? So he is accessible. Right down number 2, he is approachable. He is approachable. Look at this. Verse 22, then one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus, and his name means grace or the kindness of life. His name is Jairus. He came there, seeing Jesus, look at this, he fell at his feet. So he's approachable. This synagogue ruler can come up to Jesus, fall at his feet. The word fall at his feet, now Mark says fall at his feet. Matthew says that he bows down to worship. So 2 words. Proskuneo is what Matthew uses. Pro before skuneo means to kiss, and to be reverent. Mark just says he falls down. He just falls down in front of Jesus. This synagogue ruler. He is approachable. All who wants to come can come. You ever hear a guy named Bob Thien? He was a preacher down in Houston. Bob Thien. If you went to his church, you were called a Themite. This guy was an ex-military guy, and he was so strict in his rules that when you sat there, when the Sunday church service began, you couldn't move. Seriously, if you got up to go to the bathroom, he'd call you out. Look him up. He would preach. He would preach with 2 9mm under his suit coat holster. I'm serious. If you went and challenged him in his doctrine, he would challenge you to a fight and take you outside the back of the church and fight. His name was Bob Thien. Now his church is no longer in existence.
You're working, Bob.
That wasn't because of Bob.
I knew a guy, Phil, you remember Phil? A friend of mine, Phil Cameron, he's like a Navy SEALs, ex kind of military guy. He went to that church. That's what he would attract. So you couldn't approach that guy at all. You can approach Jesus. All who want to come, you can approach. You know, one guy, Chuck Swindoll tells a story about a guy who came up to him and said, you know, I've gone to your church a few times, and I'm not coming anymore. And Chuck says, well, how come? He says, because I can go to the local bar and sit there and get more love and acceptance from those people at that bar than I can from your church. That's pretty strong, right? When a lot of times you go to a church, unless you dress a certain way, unless you talk a certain way, unless you shake hands a certain way, you can't be part of that church. God forbid you come to church on a Sunday morning with problems, right? Or burdened down with trials and hurts and pain. Man, aren't we the hospital for the sick? Aren't we supposed to be so approachable? To where you come, that's where you should go. Yeah, when you're beat down.
You know, I want to say it, because I know it's still right. A lot of it, I think, is because of the mystique. You want to hear Swindoll, probably the greatest story, next to you.
Alright, what do you want?
And I've noticed the same thing. But I gotta tell you, the way they do things, God is pleased in a lot of ways. But they have a new preacher, Jonathan Murphy, and he is the real deal.
That's what I hear.
They're changing, and you're there. So, but.
Yeah, now this is when Swindoll was the pastor out in California. Yeah, so not.
Okay, well, same
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, but it could apply. Go ahead.
One of the issues that in our ministry work with churches on is that very thing. We have been accustomed to crowds and a certain way of operating, and it's not conducive to reaching people the way God has called us to. And because we do it because it's a natural sort of progression of our church. If it grows, there'll be a lot of people, popular preacher, then you have a tendency to kind of warp into certain things. And the idea is to find ways as you're growing, to find ways within your church to be more personable. For instance, one of the things we advise churches to do, if you got 200 or 300 people, congregation or more, you need to have people whose job it is, specifically, to meet people, introduce yourself to people, and then connect those people to other people. Where people don't come into a large crowd and just kind of disappear. But one example is it happens over and over again. We had a guy, Greg, who lived with us eventually lived for about 2 months. We met him in the foyer of the church, sitting there, and everything about him said there's something wrong. But everybody was gone. He had been sitting there. And my wife and I going, okay, that's weird. Plus, we need to find a way to talk to him, get him to take our picture. We come to find out he's homeless, somebody stole everything he has, and it's cold outside, and he's looking for help. And they said, come back tomorrow with somebody at the office. So it's those sort of things, right?
You know, I think the backbone of any church is the small groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I don't know if it was ever God's design or model to have these mega churches. I mean, the early church, they met in people's houses. So that told you how large they were.
Yeah.
But you remember the early church saw need, fill a need. If you had property, you'd sell it to give to the people who didn't have.
Yeah.
It was a great environment. That's how the church is supposed to be. But the church gets so big, people get lost in the crowd. With Jesus, you're never lost in the crowd. You're going to see that here. But you got to have the small groups.
Yeah.
In our church, we have got a compassion committee, a welcoming committee, you know, you get groups of people that they're gifted in that area and they go and they help. They care for the people. Yeah, it's
Because if the gospel is being effective and teaching is effective, you can't help but to grow. I mean, that's just a natural thing.
yeah, people are gonna be attracted to
Yeah,
it.
you just gotta keep adapting as you grow.
Yeah, look at Jesus, look at the crowd that's around him. Luke is gonna record that the crowd was so large it was starting to crush Jesus. So watch this guy, okay? Watch how approachable. It says that one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there seeing Jesus. He fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him. My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. And so write down point number 3, he's available. So Jesus is accessible, he is approachable, and he's available. You don't see Jesus say, well, wait a minute, don't have the time, come back tomorrow when the office is open. He's available. And Jesus went with him. Verse 24, Jesus went with him. And a large crowd followed him, pressed in around him. So I like this, Jesus is available. Now let me give you a little bit more of a background of this guy, of the magnitude of what Mark is saying. There are 2 words for the word, there are 2 Greek words for ruler. This guy is a synagogue ruler. You know what a synagogue is? Remember, that's where the Jewish people would meet on Saturday and hold their services. This guy is a ruler. There's 2 words. There's archon, which is simply just a worker or a grunt or an assistant. And the other word for ruler is arkasunagogos. Arkasunagogos. How's that for Greek? Which is the highest ranking official in the synagogue. He oversaw everything. He oversaw the elders, the worship, the teaching, the administrative aspect of the synagogue. He decided disputes. He basically dictated life in the synagogue and Judaism. He was over everybody, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Mark here uses the word arkasunagogos. Yeah, I'll say it again. He uses the big word. Matthew, here's what's interesting. Matthew just uses archon. He's just a grunt. Matthew will not give this guy the props that he deserves. This guy is the grand poobah of the synagogue. Mark uses it to let you know, again, Mark is action-packed. Matthew is he's just a grunt like everybody else. They didn't like to elevate people over themselves. So this guy, as high up as he is, falls down in front of Jesus and asks Jesus to come heal his daughter. Now, why is he asking Jesus to come heal his daughter? Remember, if he is the head of the synagogue, he is an enemy of Christ. They wanted to kill this man. Then all of a sudden, he gets a deep need. His daughter, his 12-year-old daughter, is dying. Now, I'm sure that he heard Jesus calming the storm, or maybe healing that Gadarene demoniac, or the paralyzed man that they lowered down through the roof of Pete, or maybe healing Peter's mother-in-law. We don't know. Obviously, he heard some of the miracles that Jesus was doing, and all of a sudden, he's got a need. He doesn't care if he loses his position as a synagogue ruler. He doesn't care what he has to give up. I'm going to see Jesus. How priceless and precious is the life of one of your little children or one of your grandkids? Would you do whatever it took to get before Jesus or get before someone that would do? Absolutely. So this guy doesn't care. He's going to proskuneo. He is going to bow down in humility. No matter what it takes, I'm going to do what it takes. Well, I'll never forget my brothers. So I've told you my 2 brothers, Normand and Armin, twins, a year younger than me. And both of them were major stoners. I mean, they would get stoned in the morning. They get stoned in the afternoon.
Learned it from their own
They get
brothers.
stoned at night. They were major druggy stoners. to the point where both of them got dishonorable discharges from the Air Force because of drugs. Broke my dad's heart. My dad was a lifer when it came to the military. Was so proud of both his sons when they joined the military. I remember coming home from Christmas break at college, and there they had, the pictures of both my brothers in their dress uniforms. And when they both got dishonorable discharges for drugs, broke his heart. Broke his heart. So after that, I was in Odessa, Texas, so I took both my brothers off their hands, brought them out to Odessa, Texas, where we started an underground sprinkler company called Paradise Princess. So I had them working for me, and they get stoned in the morning, they get stoned in the afternoon.
There's a song there somewhere.
There's a song.
So, yeah, it should be a song. I came up with a great title for a song. You ready for this? Songwriter. Leaning on a shovel, praying for a hole. Come on.
Say again.
Leaning on a shovel, praying for a hole.
A whole lot of healing.
A lot of Christians are like that. Leaning on a shovel, praying for a hole. Oh, you gotta move, you gotta do something. But anyway, they get stoned constantly. It got to the point where it destroyed the business. I mean, we were growing so fast. This is back when the oil boom was going and there was no housing. And then people were camped out in tents on the side of the road. We were growing. We were 6 months backed up, putting in underground sprinkler systems. It was back in the 80s. It got to the point where they destroyed my business because I was driving around setting up the jobs, and they each had their own crew, and they were getting jealous of me not having to get out there and dig in the trenches because I'm setting up. I said, if you just keep going, you'll be the ones driving around. But they got disgruntled. They said they would go repair a job and so on and so forth. They didn't do it, so it just got to the point where the reputation got bad. It was terrible. So they went off. My brother got married. Still getting stoned in the morning, afternoon, at night. And he had a little boy by his wife. Her name was Carla. He had a little boy named Joseph. And he was a preemie. He was born just a couple of months early. And they were in the hospital. The doctor came out to my brother and said, there's your boy. He was in one of those little incubator deals. He said, look at him. Say goodbye because he's not going to live. We can't save him. He's not going to live. My brother said he got down on his knees right there in front of that doctor, in front of the place where his little child was. He cried out to God like this Jairus and said, Lord, if you will save my son, I will live for you. I will give up everything. And he lived. And my brother did. He stopped smoking.
You were praying for him, weren't you?
Huh?
You've been praying for him.
Oh, yeah. You've been praying for him for a while. And he gave his life to Christ, and he had never touched it since. That was 35, 40 years ago. The guy's been walking with Jesus ever since. Now, my other brother, who got stoned in the morning, the afternoon, and night, is in prison for life for molesting his daughter and all her friends. So, he got two paths. But he got down on his knees like this ruler. Didn't care. He's in the middle of the hospital. Didn't care what it looked like. Lord, save him. Jesus, come with me. My daughter is dying. Man. C.S. Lewis said something great. God whispers to us in our pleasures. And he speaks to us in our conscience. And he shouts to us in our pain, which he uses as a megaphone to arouse a sleeping world. Boy, isn't that good? How does your pain shout to a world and wake them up? Jesus is the only comfort. Now think about this. This man approaches Jesus, his heart is heavy and sorrowful. And Jesus says, let's go. Don't you know his heart just starts to beat with joy? It's like he's coming. He's going to heal. He's going to heal my daughter so she doesn't die. I mean, this is great faith. His heart goes from breaking to rejoicing. He's coming. He's coming. He cares, and he's available. Does Jesus Christ care about every one of our problems? Absolutely. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. I think when the rapture happens, that loud shout, I think that loud shout is him calling each and every one of us by name. Think about that. How he does that, I don't know. For God so loved you, when you put yourself in that blank, God cares. And he's available. We come to him with all of our problems, for we do not have a high priest. The author of Hebrews says, that cannot sympathize with our weaknesses. The one who was tempted in all things, yet was without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with confidence, where we might receive mercy and find grace, divine enablement in our time of need. That is so good.
Just another thought. The day of Pentecost, the language, everybody heard in their own language. Even though one guy was speaking one language.
Yeah, the one that they all heard of him.
Know all our names.
So he's available, right? He is approachable and he is accessible. You get to him. And Jesus says, come on. Look, and Jesus could have healed this little girl from a distance. Couldn't he have?
Yeah.
Just say a word. He could have done it. But Jesus goes, why? Because Jesus is going to give this little girl a touch and bring her to life. Just like he's done to you and I. Just like he did to my brother. Just like he did to my brother's son Joseph. And Joseph right now is a stud. He has grown. He has kids. His wife. He's like an aerospace engineer kind of deal. God's hand has definitely been on them. So they're on their way. This is a picture of Jesus on their way to heal a dead nation, Israel. So this little girl, Jairus' daughter, is a picture of the nation of Israel, 12 years old. Now watch this. You're going to see a miracle within a miracle. So Jesus went with them. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. Now look at this. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. You know what's interesting when you go to Luke's gospel? All Luke records is nobody can heal her. Isn't that funny? Mark gives you a little more detail, right? She spends every penny she has. Multiple doctors and nobody could heal her. Why does
We don't
Luke,
have to go.
why does Luke just say, yeah, we don't have to go there? Why does Luke say, nobody can heal her?
Maybe Luke was a physician.
It's going to be bad besmirchment to his profession. He's a doctor. So this woman spent all she had. The word suffering there is mastiko in the Greek, which means to scourge or to whip with a lash. This is how badly she was suffering. So look at the contrast. Here for 12 years, this little girl has grown and has played and had joy, maybe swimming with her dad or playing with her father. 12 years of a great life, whereas this woman is 12 years of suffering and groaning with tears and in darkness. You see the contrast? Bleeding for a long time. She's been bleeding as long as that little girl's been alive. Now, some kind of a hemorrhage. When you have that continual of a blood flow, you are unclean in the Jewish culture. The Talmud, which was the extra biblical writings for the Jewish people, had 11 different methods to try to cure someone who is hemorrhaging. Most of them were toxins that you would be given. The most common cure was to carry the ashes of a burnt ostrich egg in a linen bag in the summer and in a cotton bag in the winter. Some of the other cures is you would,
Holistic approach.
oh yeah, the holistic. Listen to this. One of the other cures was to carry around a barley corn that you would pull out of the excrement of a donkey, because you would feed the animals barley. So you would have to go around and get your little piece of corn out of a donkey deal and carry that around with you. Again, a holistic or mysticism, even mysticism had gotten into the Jewish culture. But anyway, she was perpetually unclean. She couldn't, it's like a leper. She couldn't touch you, she couldn't hug you, you'd be unclean. She was ostracized. It's kind of like one of the The greatest tragedies of the whole COVID thing were people's loved ones dying and could not hug their family and get that physical touch.
This we remember a trial.
But this is the state of this woman. And again, she has a great need. She has great faith. Doesn't care what it takes. She's going to get to Jesus. Now watch this. Verse 27. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Literally, grabbed hold of his prayer tassel. Now, a Jew would have a shawl, and at the corners of it, they would sew these prayer tassels that were light blue. The idea was when you saw that prayer tassel, it caused you to look up to the blue sky as a reminder to pray. And so she goes up and thinks, man, if I just touch his clothes. She thought, if I touch his clothes, I will be healed. Now the Greek word there, healed, it's sozo, means to be saved, salvation. Now tuck that away because there's different words here for being healed. Very interesting. Look at this, 28. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. That which the doctors could not do for 12 years. Jesus did it in an instant. In a millisecond, boom. She touches him, and she is healed. All she needed was a touch. Now I want you to think, look at the irony in the story. Many are touching Jesus. Very few are touched by Jesus. Did you catch that? Many are touching Jesus, but how many have been touched by Jesus? Have you been touched by Jesus? Are you the contrite here? Are you the poor in spirit, where Jesus has touched you and healed you? What is the greatest disease of all mankind? Sin and death. And unless you get the touch from Jesus, you are not healed. You can be curious, you can be sitting in a church, you can be a weed that we saw with Christ. But many are touching him, few are touched by him. Now this is an interesting passage, now watch this. At once, verse 30, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? Now a couple things here. Jesus' power never gets depleted. It's not like he had 100% like on your battery and then all of a sudden it's down to 98. You cannot deplete the power of an omnipotent and all-powerful God. He just felt that power was being used. The power went to heal somebody. The direction of that power went out from him. Now I love this. Look at the apostles. You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask, who touched me? What did the disciples say? What do you mean, who didn't touch you? Look at all the people. What do you mean, who touched me? Don't you know that had to just rock their world? They had to go, what are you talking about? Who touched you? I'm sure they're just trying to get people away. You know, one thing I want you to see here, the power going out from, the power from Jesus is not some impersonal force detached from the sovereign source. It is his love, it's his mercy, and his grace that's flown out from him. You know, I love the scriptures say that how great is the love the Father has lavished upon us that we should be called children of God. The word lavished means overflowing, a continual source of love that's being poured out. You see why I said at the beginning, this is a story about you're never lost in the crowd? Jesus Christ feels every expression of power that leaves him. He is personally connected with you and I. Have you ever felt the power of God to get through the day or to get through a trial? And you wake up in the morning and say, Lord, where are you? I can't make it through this day. I need your strength. I need your power. It just comes. Right? The joy of the Lord is your strength. When we're in a hole. I mean, one of the things this tells me is that Jesus is fully involved in my life. He's fully involved in you and I's life. When we need a touch, when we need a healing, when we need strengthening, man, he's there.
And he knows who touched him, but he wants the person to confess.
You hear that, Daryl?
Again?
You have your moments, but that was one. I'll give you that one.
You hit your quota.
Say it again?
Say it again, loud.
He knows who touched him, but he wants that person to confess.
Yeah. He knows, right? He knows who touched him. But he wants her to come because he wants to make sure he lines out her theology.
He says,
Which I like.
You know,
Yeah.
I think what he wants most, or it's just acknowledgement.
Yes, exactly. He gives us all the stuff, and all he wants is the credit. What a deal.
Look at Proverbs 5 says, trust the Lord with all your heart.
Yeah,
Acknowledge him in all you do.
yeah. He'll make clear your path. He'll bring you. All we gotta do is lean in. Go ahead, Rob.
The other thing stands out here is that she violated everything, every rule of Leviticus 15,
Right.
15, right?
She's
She
unclean.
didn't cry out. She was out in public. She was in a crowd. She's not supposed to be anywhere else outside. If she is outside, she's supposed to make sure everybody knows she's unclean. And as you said, right, this isn't a menstrual cycle. This is the issue of blood that Leviticus addresses. It specifically said the woman who has this discharge, not of a menstrual cycle, if this happens, everything she touches is unclean, everywhere she sits is unclean, everywhere she goes is unclean.
Yeah.
She's not to touch anything. Jesus knocked all that out the window. And it says when she's cleansed, there's an 8-day period that she's supposed to go through this process and sacrifice. He completely knocked all that out.
He gives her the erotic blessing.
Yes.
So these are all excellent
I
points.
Sorry,
I love
sorry.
it. Oh, you're good. I love it. Keep coming. Now look at this. And who touched me? You see the people crowding against you, your disciples answered, and yet you can ask who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet. Proskuneo, same thing. Bowed down, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, don't miss this. Daughter, what's he saying to her? You're clean, you're accepted, you're failing. There's no fear. Instantly, daughter, you're part of the family. If you had this kind of a condition, if you're a leper, you are outside the family. You are ostracized.
Quarantine.
Quarantine. You are lower than low. I love it. He calls her daughter. Your faith has healed you, to Daryl's point. What healed her? He wants to make sure it's not the magical touch of the tassel. It's your faith. She did whatever it took, despite the culture, despite probably getting spit on and stoned. Who knows? She did whatever it took to get to Jesus. That's faith.
Well, in contrast that with Jesus, somebody asked Jesus, what did their parents do to cause this person to be crazy? Like, who sinned?
Yeah.
And there's
Right.
none of that.
Right.
This was done strictly to bring God glory.
Yeah.
Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be healed from your suffering. Now, let me just give you the word for healed. That word healed that she used, back in verse 27, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. That word is sozo. It's salvation. In 29, it says, immediately her bleeding stopped and she felt in her body that she was healed, freed from her suffering. That word is the word eomai, which means a physical healing. Now remember, the first word, sozo, is salvation. She uses the word eomai here. And then Jesus, when he says, go in peace, right? Let's see. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Basically, you are healed. That word there is hugies, Hugies, which means to be made whole. To be made whole. Isn't that interesting? If I just touch him, I can be saved from this physical infirmity. She is healed, and now she is made whole. She is daughter. She is now saved.
Oh, what's the difference?
Huh?
What's the difference? I was gonna say.
One means saved, one means physically healed, and the other is saved and physically healed, made whole. Right? Because when man was separated from God in the garden, he was separated spiritually and physically. Now Jesus says, you have been whole, been made whole, spiritually and physically. Now,
inside the miracle.
This is the miracle inside the miracle. Because now look,
he's cured while he's on his way.
he's on his way to heal Jairus'
I can't-
daughter who's dying.
Every time I read the story, I'm stuck in Jairus' head going, what was he thinking? Like, dude,
Hey, come on.
come on.
Exactly. Come on.
Like,
What,
I mean,
what do you mean?
my daughter's dying here. I mean,
What do you mean?
it had to be hard. I mean, it had to be hard for him to just stand back and watch.
Time is of the essence. Jesus says, wait a minute. See me, feel me. And it's a great picture. Again, it's a great picture of Jesus Christ coming to the Jewish people
Yes.
and stops and heals the church, this woman, and then goes back and he heals the Jewish people. That's where we are right now. Right now we see the healing of the woman who's been hemorrhaging for 12 years. The perpetually unclean people, and I'm looking at y'all and me. And he stops and he heals us. Now watch, the scene picks back up in verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, so now we go back to the Jewish synagogue ruler's daughter. Watch this. While they were still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. Your daughter is dead. They said, why bother the teacher anymore? Luke records that 3 times. She's dead, she's dead, she's dead. To make sure you emphasize, when you see something 3 times in the scriptures, there's a pattern that's set, she's dead. Now think about this. Like you were saying, Troy, think about what Jairus thinking. Doggone it, if you wouldn't have stopped for this woman, we would have got there.
Right.
His heart went from sadness to gladness back to sadness. But this is one of the most greatest verses in all of Scripture. Look at this. Verse 36, ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, don't be afraid, just believe. That's my word for you this morning. Don't be afraid. Stop fearing your fear in the Greek literally. Just believe.
How do you do that?
Just believe.
How do you do that?
You have to convince yourself in your mind. And sometimes it's a battle to where you get home at night and lay your head on the pillow because you've had to fight those thoughts of negativity to the point where your brain is mush.
How do you do that?
You tell yourself constantly, God creates all things, He controls all things, and He can do all things. Period. God said it. That settles it whether I believe it or not. It's a constant taking captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. What's He say to this man? Don't fear. Believe. Replace your fear with faith. The fear is coming in your mind 24/7, is it not? And you have to constantly shove those negative thoughts out of your brain and replace them with Scripture. Replace them with what you know, not by what you feel. That's what Jesus is saying. Don't worry about it. Believe. You came to me with great faith. You came to me believing I can do this. Keep on believing. That's the best I can give you. That's how you do it. It's a constant battle in the brain. This is the battlefield. This right here, your mind is the battlefield. And Paul says you got to take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Go ahead.
Well, you came to the thing you kept saying, I kept talking, but I learned it, listen to Focus on the Family when Jim was there, about camp where they had these young guys and had these great looking young ladies over there. They would, don't think about it. So they repeat a memory verse every time. You know, that's what I had to do, and I still do, because I have get strong feelings, and it's the only way you can get that is through Scripture memory.
Some
And you have, and the thing is, it's a battle for you. What's that?
Put on this little armor.
Yeah, it's just over, you know, and sometimes you have to do it over and over and over.
Psalm 119, 14, and then Psalm 119, 89, 90, 91. Oh, the young man keep his way pure. Right?
One thing I was praying today is you see a woman that's easy to lust.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is verse 165, Psalm 119. I say it every morning. Great peace have they who love thy law, and nothing will make him break the law. what you get by living a life that's pleasing to God, because He can only give that. And I think that's and what's happened to the church is this great book, Shepherds by for Sale, how they have replaced the Word of God with therapy. And she talks about how so many major people have been bought off.
Alright, so let's see what's gonna happen here. Stop fearing your fear, believe. Now look at the scene. So they get to the house. Verse 37, he did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue ruler, again, Mark just keeps emphasizing that, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. Now let me give you a little background of what a funeral looked like in this culture. For us, it's real quiet, it's hush. There's an organ playing very lightly. You whisper, you're all in your best dressed clothes. A funeral back in this culture had three components. Number one, you had to express grief loudly, shrieking and wailing. Everybody. You would tear your clothes. The Jewish tradition, the Talmud had 34 different regulations on how to tear your clothes. You'd rip it over your heart, you'd wail, you'd shriek out, loud wailing. Number two, you would hire professional wailers. That would be your job. You would hire professional wailers to get the pump going, to prime the pump. They would pay you. So the agony that you were feeling was to be magnified. And then three, you would have lots of flute playing. I don't know what the deal is with the flute playing. So you can imagine, here Jesus comes up. Here's Jairus. They said his daughter's dead. The funeral is in full swing. They're wailing, there's flutes playing, everybody's screaming and throwing ashes and dust on themselves, ripping their clothes. And Jesus walks in and stops the funeral. Get out of here. She's not dead, but asleep. And I love the fact that Jesus looks at death as being asleep. Paul uses that. The idea is at some point you're waking. He puts a halt to the funeral. Can you imagine the flute playing, the shrieking, the wailing, the crying out, stop! She's not dead, but asleep. It stops, and look at what the noise was replaced with. But they laughed at him. Instantly, they stopped wailing and shrieking. Shows, of course, it's all fake. To where they go, ah! And they start cracking up at Jesus. She's blue. She's cold. She's starting to stink. Look at her. She's dead. What do you mean she's asleep? They didn't know who they were talking to, did they? After he put them out, Mark's gospel, it's a firm, he shoved them out. You know, in the English, it's too light. After he put them all out, it should read, and Jesus shoved them out of the door. Get the heck out of here. He took the child's father, mother, and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha kum. That's Aramaic, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up, walked around. She was 12 years old. So why does Mark record that she gets up and she's walking around? What do you think? It's to let you know she is fully alive. And then what did he say? At this, they were completely astonished. And he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. Potato in the Greek means to walk around, to go around, to walk around constantly. It's imperfect in the Greek. She just kept walking around. People are freaking out. Why does it say to give her something to eat? What's that tell you?
She's alive.
She's alive. She's walking around. This just isn't a figment of your imagination. She's alive, and she's going to continue to be alive. You better give her some food.
Jesus didn't have to, right? So that he was alive. After the crucifixion, it's interesting that when Jesus appeared to the apostles, he was always eating.
Yeah.
So there's
to let you know.
Interesting, yeah, there's an interesting.
Yeah, we're coming up to the Easter season, you know, with the resurrection and everything else. I mean, only Jesus. So if you and I follow the living Lord Jesus Christ, we do not follow the teachings of a dead man. He is not here. He has risen. He's alive.
Another violation. He touched her.
Yeah.
As a he's not supposed to touch her.
Yeah.
He touched her and the
Yeah, you don't touch a dead person.
Yeah.
He's like the opposite.
Yeah.
You know?
He's dashing over there.
Yeah, a dead person will make you unclean and ostracized, where Jesus will take that uncleanliness and make you alive. Did he not do that for us on the cross?
Amen.
Did he not take all our sin, all our filth, and nail it to a tree and give us life and give it to us more abundantly? Boy, isn't that good? What's the take home? 3 points, Brother Rogers. Simply 3 points. What are they? Jesus is what? He's accessible, and he's available. Always. Is there ever a time when Daryl will go up to Jesus and say, sorry, I ain't got no time, and put you on hold? Will you ever be put on hold by Christ when you call out to him?
Never.
1 John chapter 5. This is the confidence we have in approaching him. That if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And we know that if he hears us, we receive from him what we ask. Anybody know what God's phone number is? I've told you this before. God's phone number. It's in the Old Testament book of Jeremiah.
Jeremiah 33:3.
Jeremiah 33:3. Do you know what it says? Can you
Call
quote
me
it?
and I will answer
Isn't that good? Call unto me and I will answer you. There's no hole. One of the things that drives me the most crazy, you can't even get a real person today. We were talking about that. When you call up, you get bounced, you get stinking recordings and everything else. Can I send you a link so you can go? No, I don't want it. I want a real person.
Okay, but first.
Without accent.
But first, can you tell me what you're calling for? To speak to a real person. All right, I'm about to edify you guys, okay? We need to be a little edified here. I wrote a poem a while back. I got in touch with my sensitive side. So you got to get in touch with your sensitive side. It's a good poem. Listen to it. And it's good for this story. It lets you know you're never lost in a crowd. You're never lost in a crowd. Jesus is always there to touch you and to strengthen you. I think one of the greatest scenes is in the book of Revelation where John falls on his face and Jesus touches him. He gives him strength. Listen to this poem. I saw you crying late last night as you knelt by your bed to pray. And so I wrapped my arms around you, but you didn't feel them there. My heart filled with pain as you crawled into bed, and I brushed back your hair as you laid down your head. And I touched your cheek and caught every tear and whispered, please don't cry, I'm here. I promise I'm right here. So I held you tightly throughout the night and woke you gently with soft morning light. I watched as you fell on your knees to pray, crying out, Lord Jesus, where are you? I can't make it through another day. And I whispered back, I'm here. I'm right here. Read my word and you'll see help is truly on the way. So you took your Bible and you opened the covers and your eyes fell to the page. And my words spoke to your heart as you read, for I will be with you always, even to the very end of the age. Isn't that good? He's always
Give that to
there.
Stephen Curtis.